If you're separated, divorced, and/or a single parent, today's episode is for you. My friend Alicia Robertson is joining me to talk about co-parenting and single parenting. Alicia is a life coach, speaker, and author. She supports women through the vulnerable and challenging time that is separation and divorce, and helps them take their power back one intentional and informed decision at a time. And after spending several days with Alicia last year, I can tell you that she is an incredibly positive and passionate advocate for women. She also makes me laugh a lot, which I always value in a friend. I can't wait for you all to get to know her. Hi, I'm Allison and Egidi, a pediatric sleep and wellness coach and a mom of two. I love to help parents find solutions. This is How Long Till Bedtime. Well, hey, Alicia. Thank you so much for joining me today. You and I met a little over a year ago. We were just saying it's kind of our 1-year anniversary. We met through our mutual friend, Leanne, and we spent a highly entertaining few days together out in the Seattle area. And I'm really looking forward to introducing you to my listeners who don't yet know you. So the first question I always like to ask my guests is, what inspired you to pursue your vocation and to start your business?
Well, I went through my own unexpected turn of fate through separation and divorce, and found it to be an incredibly overwhelming, isolating, unfamiliar, and debilitating process. It's personal. It's my family. It was everything that I had ever imagined about my family coming to an end. And it was filled with so much. For me, taking off my wedding ring was this, like removing a status that I was safe, that I was secure, that I'd made it, that, I was a wife, something I was so proud and fortunate to be, that I was a mom. And if taking off my wedding ring meant that I was no longer a wife, did that mean that I no longer had a family or had access to be a mom? All that shame and stigma about broken homes and single parenting, it was terrifying. At the time, I had a 4.5-year-old and a 6-month-old. So I was in the throes of postpartum anxiety and trying to manage 2 little ones through this process. And I actually could not imagine that, despite the fact we hear that divorce is such a thing for so many people, that there were so little resources and so few people that I could lean on or turn to. And something that really mattered to me was that the stigma, the shame, this notion of broken home was never going to be our lived experience. And so everything I did was super intentional for this to be positive and healthy and happy, and that our family, through the greatest challenge of our life, would always be our family. It was just going to look a little different. And so after going through this experience, I wanted to create the very thing that I couldn't find, which was community and connection and coaching. And so I just went out to write a book to share some strategies, some experience, so that people weren't grieving in isolation as much as I had. And when I put the book out into the world, there was an overwhelming demand for what it was that I was speaking about. And so Lemonade Life was born. I had always worked as an executive and as a professional in organizational development, coaching, mentorship. And I used all of those skills on the emotional intelligence and leadership space and project management, strategy and mindset to approach how to navigate divorce in a healthy way. So that is now the program and the coaching community that exists. And it's incredible. 3 years later, we've got over 40,000 people that we're interacting with every single day.
Yeah. And I remember when I first heard your business, I thought, oh, that's depressing. Like, what a bummer. And then when I spent a few days with you, I thought, wow, the spin you put on it about being empowered and positive and getting through divorce and separation with grace, I left inspired just watching you talk about your work and realizing this is really needed because so many people end up in this situation. And it's not that they got married assuming they'd end up here, but it's so easy to spiral or just to hear everyone's negative experiences. And I don't know, I think my perspective on your business changed so drastically over what I initially thought when I heard the concept versus spending time with you. It's really, well, you're a very positive, inspiring person. So it was a good shift in my own perspective after learning about the great business that you have started out of need, because there's not a lot of people doing what you do.
Thank you. And it's interesting in terms of the listeners that we serve, why this makes this space, which is the 40-somethings, the midlife somethings with young kids, it's under 20% of the population that's navigating separation, divorce that go through that.
Interesting.
Because most of us, right, 44% or 40+% are the empty nesters. And now there's a massive uptick in gray divorce, which is in retirement 65 plus. The second actually highest percentage is starter marriages in their 20s, but they don't have kids.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's pretty neat. So this particular space with young children is actually even more, in my opinion, the sweet spot of importance, because we hold the children through this experience. And that is everything, because really, as parents that are experiencing this, often we're breaking down generational cycles of mental health, addiction, domestic violence, dysfunctional family systems. And so this is an incredible opportunity to reset for our children who are still young, and we can repair.
Absolutely. And then if it's a smaller percentage, it's probably a really underserved market. They don't get as many resources as maybe some of the bigger groups.
That's right.
Well, we are going to cover this whole topic of co-parenting and single parenting. And this is not an area that I have personal experience with, but a lot of my clients are single parents or have been navigating transitioning into co-parenting. So when you're working with someone who is separated or newly separated, what is the first piece of advice you share with them when it comes to and relates to co-parenting with two different homes?
I love this question. And many people don't like my first piece of advice because what is that saying? The truth will set you free, but first it's going to hurt, right? And so it's this, I find for many women, our entire identity becomes our labels and titles, wife and mom. And at the end of the day, motherhood, being a mom, is a job description. Right? It is a job that you do. It's not who you are. It gives you great purpose and fulfillment and contribution in the world, but ultimately it's a job that you choose to do well. And the piece that probably hurts the most is that you are not perfect, just like your former partner or current partner is not either. And clearly you have a different perspective on values and goals and parenting styles, or you'd likely still be together. And so acknowledging that there is no right or wrong, it's different perspectives in the pursuit of the same goal, which is to create stability for our children. And so how we're going to get there in each of our homes might look differently, but stay in your lane and recognize that you two are not perfect, right?
Yeah, I think that's so true. Even for married couples, getting on the same page is not always easy. I mean, I experience it in my house. I experience it with my clients. And so I can imagine that with all the emotions that come with being separated or getting divorced, that challenge only increases of trying to get on the same page. And it's, I envision you're kind of like, well, great, now I get to do it my way.
Yeah.
And so I have, I've seen a lot of my clients struggle with getting on that same page. Of course, in my world, it relates to schedules and routines, specifically around sleep. And so I'm curious, how do you help parents start to navigate finding, I guess maybe it's the middle ground, if it's, there's no one right way, which I totally agree with, but how do we help them find that middle ground?
Right. This is where I like to stick to the facts, right? What is the job title? What is the job description? What are the responsibilities? What are the goals? What are the attributes, the qualities, the competencies required to parent? And so I love to break down, if we can parent from a place of knowing exactly who we are as a parent and how we want to effectively move through that parenting style with an understanding or an appreciation for perhaps a different parenting style that the other parent might have. And so quite simply, when we determine who we are as a parent, who we want to be as a parent and show up with our children, we are really becoming aligned on some requirements. And that is safety, security, and stability of the children as it relates to their social, emotional, and physical well-being. That is the goal of what we're trying to do here. And so the more that we can clearly outline what that is, focused on the children, then we can create some routines, some consistencies, some agreements that are non-negotiables, right? Things like sleep hygiene, right? Nutrition, the things that matter to make sure that the children are thriving, including additional goals that children may have. There's different complexities that every child has as they're working through at different ages and stages. And so what does that look like? And how do we need to operate and function as a family? And probably the biggest thing people say, well, I have such a high conflict situation, or, my other partner isn't listening, which again, there's different ways of looking at this, whether it's co-parenting where you can do so amicably, or parallel parenting where you really have to, for a variety of reasons, stay fairly distant. So then it becomes really having this agreement that is documented and that can be shared in a very efficient system. So in our community, we practice, at the end of every month, let's send what is the month's calendar for the family, inclusive of the agreed upon consistency, stability that is required in both homes, and any special events, holidays, traditions, vacations, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, according to our agreement and what is on tap for this month, here is the proposed schedule. If there are any changes, please let me know. Otherwise, Friday, this is going to be communicated to the children on the family calendar and to any of the stakeholders that are supporting us, and we move forward, right? So it's really, establishing the goals, the priorities, and then having a really effective communication and feedback loop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so one area that I've seen parents I work with go through specifically relates to structure around bedtime. And there will be one parent who's all in on the importance of sleep and that this bedtime matters and this routine matters. And then they'll contact me because they'll say, well, my child's other parent is very loosey-goosey around what time the children go to bed, what the bedtime routine looks like. They're just doing something completely different. And they feel like they're getting a lot of blowback at their house. And so, of course, I love everything you're saying. I am not the person who can coach them through co-parenting. But what I usually say is, if we can't meet somewhere in agreement, I still think it's important for you to hold that structure in your home. And there can be some recognition to children that I understand your mother or your father does this differently, but when you're here, this is how we're going to handle sleep. I'm curious your thoughts on that, or if you have other tips around, we're just going to take bedtime when we can't get on the same page as it relates to a routine and structure and consistency.
Right. So, in my space, I'm just going to deal with some of the brutal, hard facts that are in my space when you're dealing with sometimes people that are trying to identify who should be the primary caregiver, right? And who is the person who provides the most safety, security, and stability of the children. And so in that space, it's very much evidence, right? It is very much the facts that are. So if we know that this is what a healthy bedtime routine is, we have this documented. The next step is that we take opinions and judgments out of it. So for me to say, well, I just know that, they have a better day when they go to bed early, right? Their behavior is more well adjusted so that they can function more calmly through the day is more where we want to go to, right? We want to stay out of judgments and opinions and to the facts. So the facts are bedtime is a requirement because it has these impacts to their social, emotional, and physical well-being. And so then when the child does not have the appropriate bedtime, and then we see what the impacts are on the child, we can actually loop back to a higher power or focused on the child. Today was a really tough day for our son or daughter emotionally, right? At school, they were held back at recess because they got into some aggressive back and forth with another child, whatever that might be, but at least the facts are there, the data's there.
Yeah.
So, hey, this is not serving our child, and it is your job and your responsibility to make sure that our child has the ability to be emotionally regulated while they work through their day, and that requires this bedtime. So in my space, that requires it to be documented, right? That this is impacting the child in a negative way. And really, Allison, what I'm saying is that we don't get to opt in or opt out as parents when the facts and the evidence are clear.
Yeah.
Children, and we have so much research that children require, right, nutrition. They require sleep hygiene. They require these things. So, in terms of, to your question, I like to stay out of opinions and judgment and really just stick to the facts. And then, of course, understanding that not every day is going to be equal. Of course, I don't always win at bedtime, right? I don't always, there's special circumstances. However, there's opportunity to repair and catch up and to learn from that, not be the norm.
Yeah. It's very similar with families that are all in the same household. I always say when I have a parent who's skeptical of where we're headed, because sometimes I have one parent who's hired me and the other one is still skeptical. And I always tell them the proof is in the pudding. So I don't need you to believe me necessarily. I just need us to take steps. And then if things are better, you realize your child has more emotional regulation, impulse control, improved learning retention, or just if they're littler, easier demeanor or seem happier, healthier, then you can decide if you want to forge ahead. So what I'm hearing you say is it's very similar. The proof is in the pudding. Now we just maybe need to document it so that everyone can see the facts, and that can help people get on the same page.
It's so true. And sometimes, let's face it, I don't know, my experience, there usually is a primary caretaker who is, responsible for those strategies. So what happens when you go through uncoupling, you have one caretaker who may not be an expert at this yet.
Yes.
Right? So having this opportunity to, with compassion and forgiveness, understand that people, even your partner, we used to have this conversation in our married home, right? But let's learn together. What is it about what I do? Let's not assume that this other person just understands how to get there.
Right.
And so how do we learn together to make sure that we can come up with the simple strategies that work for you in your home?
Totally. The other area that I see parents struggle with during this transition into separation, I would say in the earlier days, is, well, I'll tell you what I hear from them is my child is going through a lot of transition and they are anxious and they are more needy at bedtime or needing me during the night. And I feel that I need to provide extra support for them. And then I hear from them because suddenly they have a sleep regression on their hands and they're really struggling. And they're really struggling to navigate that balance between supporting their child through this new period, this transitional period, and getting used to a new normal versus keeping those healthy sleep habits they had before. So I'm curious your thoughts on those transitional periods and either maintaining something that was always there, even if it feels a little harder than normal, or doing something different. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I love this question because it is hard. We're going through such an emotional time, which is why I'm such an advocate. We're talking about being focused on the children, but my belief is that to be focused on the children and to do best for the children, we actually have to take care of ourselves first. Right? So first and foremost is, are you finding what you need in terms of the support to, through professionals, through community, to be able to work through what you need to work through? Are you doing the self-care strategies that matter to you so that things don't feel overwhelming and like there's so much decision fatigue, or that you are really struggling with day-to-day functions in your home? And then for the children, oh my goodness, the mom guilt, shame, fear comes up in a nanosecond. Right? Anytime our children are suffering or our perception is that they're suffering, the worry ball drops in. But that, in fact, is probably the worst place to parent from. Mm-hmm. The fear, the reactivity, right? Really being able to respond, right? So with children, they do need, they need the safety, they need the structure, they need it to be routine and consistent, but of course they need to be able to share. You want them to share, and you want them to be able to work through what they're working through, all of their grief, all of the big tough feelings. But we can do those in a way that also is structured. Right? Mommy wants to sit with you and lean in with curiosity. And mommy may not have all of the answers, but she's willing to find out, right? To really sit in that place of curiosity, meeting them with where they're feeling, right? Mm-hmm. And where they're at, and not doing it. I mean, that doesn't require to be done as an interruption to bedtime, mm-hmm. right?
Yeah.
The bedtime is actually what they need most to be able to process those really big, tough, complex feelings. So I just think that, kids are still kids. And when they're going through this, a lot of times when I lean in with curiosity, my kids, it's not what I perceive it to be or what I might project it to be. Oh no, it's all of these things that they're worried about. Kids oftentimes are just pushing back on bedtime. They just want to stay up, and they know that they're going to be able to get this from you because you're an easy target right now. Right. Kids pick up on that, right? True. They know that they play off of the guilt and any of the shame and any of the things that you're feeling. They know they're so good at perceiving where the loops are in the system and how they can take advantage of that. So, my kids, I know sometimes they'll layer onto things, and at the end of the day, it's just actually really little selfish things that matter to them. It's an inconvenience, right? They just don't want to go back and forth between homes because they have to pack another bag. It's not all the big things that we make it to be.
Right.
So I just think it's the same with, all of the routines, including bedtime.
Yeah.
They just want to stay up later.
Totally. And I think your point about the self-care being important plays into that, because if you are taking care of yourself and the vibe that your child is getting from you is that you are working on thriving and that you are not crumbling, then I think that helps them feel more comfortable in their routine, like, oh, mom's got this under control. She's working on herself and thriving, and also makes them not see like, oh, here's our weak link. Here's our weak link tonight. We're going to be staying up for God knows how long because of it. So I love that idea of prioritizing yourself. So I'd love to touch on that a little bit. When you have someone who's either newly separated or been separated for a while or divorced or just still struggling, what are 1, 2, or 3 things that you say, hey, start here. Start here and you're going to feel more in control, more like yourself. What are a couple tips you would give for women, because I think that's your kind of core group of who you work with, who are struggling in this area of taking care of themselves during this tough time?
I love this because so many of the women that I'm working with are dealing with establishing self-worth, healthy boundaries, communication, and confidence. And so self-worth, right, and those healthy boundaries start first for ourselves. Exactly what you're talking about is prioritizing ourselves. I am worthy, I matter. And during really tough times, I think what's different is that we have all these buzz expectations, hit the gym, do intermittent fasting, big goals. And what we know is that behavioral shifts take time. And what's most important is progress and consistency over perfection. And so for me, I love self-care strategies that are starting to be in alignment with your self-worth, who you are and who you are becoming. What do I love to do for myself? What do I find soothing? What is accessible to me today? Right? Small things. And so for me, it could be a playlist, right? Turning on some music, just turning on music while you're doing some of the routines. If you're into mindfulness and meditation, don't worry that it's a perfect time and that you have a mat and the lighting and silence in the home. You can do it, right? With the kids in the bed beside you, put your earbuds in and go. We can wash our face. Mm-hmm. We can take a walk. We can just sit and breathe and have a tea. We can give ourselves permission to nap, to go to bed with the kids, right? And maybe not with them, but at the same time. It just really giving ourselves permission to play.
Right.
So many moms are busy doing all of the things, the laundry, the dishes, the list. How about we just go and play with the kids? So it's this notion of making sure that we're carving out time to prioritize ourselves for whatever that matters, that we can be intentional with what it is that we can do in a very accessible way, but in a way that we value, right? Not just because other people have said that it's important or that it matters to them. And just making sure, because this happened to me when I was with the kids, it's easy for it to become all about the kids. That's the perpetual burnout that we get kicked back into when we just keep making it all about the kids. And then I wasn't serving anyone. I remember being in a pool in the backyard with my kids and someone asked me to go out somewhere social. And I remember feeling fear to leave my children, to get out of my home. And that's when I knew, and I was with a professional, I was with a therapist, I knew, oh my goodness, I'm putting my emotional needs for safety, security, and fun and play and interaction too much on my children. So it's so important to make sure that we are carving out a very independent, self-guided program for ourselves.
And it's funny. I think this is the kind of advice we all need, really, in life to thrive. And I talk about it a lot with some of my friends that as I turned 40, I realized somehow in this motherhood journey, starting my own business journey, I don't have a hobby anymore. So I used to ride horses, and then that became a little too time consuming. Anyway, somehow I slipped out of a hobby without realizing it. And for me, I thought, gosh, this is something I feel a big gap in my life. And so I picked up tennis when I turned 40. And it's brought me great joy. But what comes up a lot of times with women I'm with is, well, I don't know how you have the time to do it. Or I couldn't do that. I don't have the time. And, my kids' activities, which my kids are in a ton of activities too. But I always come back to, I have two girls, and I will think it's great if they become mothers, if that's what they choose to do. But I think I'm not just raising my kids to be mothers, to just give and give and give and give. And I hope that when they're adults, they maintain a piece of themselves. I'm pouring into them right now because I want them to be so happy and to find their passions. And I'm hoping that they don't just grow up and not have passions. And so I'm kind of hearing what you're saying and thinking it's the same sort of concept. You still need to find what fills your cup. For me, it's tennis and meditation and all these things. And I think to get there, I did a lot of experimenting to decide what type of journaling works well for me, what type of meditation works well, how often do I like to meditate, what is going to be my new hobby. It turned out to be tennis. But all of that, I think, is such a great example for our kids to see our parents having passion about something.
I totally agree. I think that, well, I know that the only way that children are learning is through what we model. And I totally agree with you that it's really important that we're not saying one thing and doing another. And so what I've loved about this experience is that I have been able to become curious and to be able to put myself first and really to model that self-worth and what are a healthy way of living according to me. They can choose different ways and different lifestyles, but I'm modeling what is super healthy. And I also model it in the moments when we're a family and together, that we're each heard and seen, right? What matters to you today? What matters to you right now? And if we each can come up with what is our top 3 priorities, we can also work towards that as a collective. And so just baking it into everything we're doing.
Yeah, I love that. So I want to ask a kind of random question, but for the listener who, like me when I met you, is thinking, a life coach who coaches people through divorce and separation, can you help everyone, including me, understand the difference between a therapist who is helping someone through this transition, or in general, therapists are great in a variety of aspects of life, versus a coach like you who is coaching people in this period of their life?
Yeah, I thank you for that, because I think it is a really important distinction. And so where I meet clients is with where helping them to identify their values, their vision, their goals, their timeline, right? Mapping out what is important to them and their life. And I support people from a mindset, from a strategy, and from a project management side of things, so that we can have really clear, focused, and strategic ways to quickly have progress, momentum, and acceleration. Right? And so it's in that change model where, we have awareness, and then we have resources and skills and tools that we're building, and then we're making decisions, right? We're getting into action. And then when we get into action, we come up against feedback. And the feedback, when we're learning new things that are new to us, can register as pain, right? Those are flipping from that subconscious autopilot patterns that might no longer be serving us into that frontal cortex of learning. It registers as pain. And I'm here as a coach to keep you moving forward. That when what feels right is to be kicked back into old patterns and old behaviors, we can have strategies to keep moving forward. Now, a therapist, a counselor, a professional can really help to work through what and why those old patterns exist, to be able to really address some of the root problems or circumstances, why that is something that you might be dealing with. Because you do need both. I really, as a coach, I sit at the situational level. Here's the situation. It might be tough, but usually temporary, and we can work through it. where a therapist can really help to unpack what is old, what has been modeled, what has been perhaps debilitating for a long time. And so I think it's a really beautiful blend. And I do think it's not a one size fits all no matter what camp you're in. I'm a big fan of using both together to be able to do both simultaneously, as well as for the family, right? I always did one session of therapy for myself and one for the children and practice that way. But it's important that we find a fit with those coaches. So for me, I'm a big fan of therapists that are more like coaches. I want to know what, I want to know why, I want the strategies, I want to move forward. For some of us, we actually need greater therapy that is informed and based in perhaps trauma, right? So it's really important to know what it is that we're unpacking and who can work best with us. It's not a one size fits all, that's for sure.
Right. Well, and I like that from your side. I remember you saying this when we spent time together last year about it's like a project, and the going through the divorce has steps that need to be taken, and that sometimes people are paralyzed with what is the next step or, moving through it. And so some project management is needed. And I could see that is not where a therapist is going to focus. They're not helping you on the project management side of getting through the divorce.
No, and you've got so many professionals that you're going to be enlisting on your team to get through this. Lawyers, accountants, real estate, financial investors, financial planners. There's quite a big team, and the stakes are pretty high. This is about your whole life. And so, yes, it's a job we don't want to do. It's a job we've never done before, but absolutely, I guarantee, because any of your listeners are people that are, growth mindset, aspirational learners, positive individuals, guarantee we have the skills that are required to do this. We've just never done it before. So having a resource to say, okay, this is tough but manageable, and it absolutely is a project where we can become really aligned with what matters to myself and my family, what are my priorities, and what is the information I need to be able to move this forward. And that way, the professionals that you're working with can really quickly become aligned with what it is that your goals are and do what is required from their perspective to move towards your goals. Because so often people show up to professionals' offices, including people like doctors. And again, we're in that opinions and judgment space. We're in the feeling space. But, we show up to a lawyer's office with a blank check in hand, just take care of this, thinking that they are going to be the decision makers, the problem solvers, the therapists, right? All these things. No. Let's understand clearly who our professional is and what they do so that we can use them exactly with what they're meant to be used for.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So interesting.
Which is why I love niches like ours, right? That I might focus on separation and divorce, where you focus on sleep. To me, it is such an opportunity in this moment in time where coaching is available to people that it is laser focused.
Oh yeah.
It helps to give that clarity for this is exactly what I want and need.
Yes.
Thank you. Let's go.
Well, it's kind of like I say, we were not born knowing how to be parents, and you don't get married typically unless you've gone through it knowing how to get divorced. And so there's so many areas when I get stuck in parenting, I immediately turn to, there has to be someone who this is their expertise and they can help me. And it does take a team, just like a parenting. You have your pediatrician, and you might have a sleep coach, and you might have a therapist, and you can have all these people. And so it makes total sense, although I'd never thought about it before meeting you, that you could have a coach to coach you through this new realm that you have not encountered before. So super interesting. And I'm so glad you joined me today to talk through this. So if we think about a listener who is newly separated or thinking about separation, what's the one thing you want them to know when it comes to thinking about co-parenting and navigating this new normal?
That's a great question. And by the way, 50% of my clients are in contemplation.
Oh.
And many of them are paralyzed with this fear and this anxiety about, are my kids going to be okay? Right? It's on the co-parenting side of things. And so what I'm here to say is that the cost of inaction is far greater to a family system in terms of their emotional, resilience, their ability to have stability, all of the things that we've talked about. They can feel that what is going on in the home, the conflict and so on, whether it's big conflict or just, lacking healthy partnership and intimacy, is that the children are going to be okay if you're okay. And that children are resilient and they are here to learn from you how to be capable and resourceful and independent. And so if you're okay and you become informed at how to become a co-parent, they're going to be okay too.
Yeah.
And really, as parents, and I think you've said, Allison, none of us are perfect. We're going to make the best, most informed decision that we have right now. We have no control over what the future holds. So as much as we can stay in this moment and give ourselves a lot of grace and compassion for the fact that we are learning and brave. So co-parenting doesn't happen overnight.
Yes.
Parenting doesn't happen overnight. I pass and fail every day.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Love that. Well, thanks again for joining me. Let everyone know how they can find you.
I am always happy to be in conversation at connect@lemonadelife.ca. We also have our website, lemonadelife.ca, and on all social, Lemonade Life Coach. And I look forward to hearing from each and every one of you. I'm in those. It's not a bot. It's me personally. So reach out and join the community because we're here for you.
Love it. Well, thanks again. It was so nice to see your face and to chat with you. And I will make sure we link to that in the show notes, all of your links you mentioned. And thank you for the work that you do supporting women and specifically supporting moms.
Thank you, Allison. I am so grateful and honored to be a part of your community.
All right. Talk to you soon. Bye for now. Thank you for listening to How Long Till Bedtime. To learn how we can work together to improve your child's sleep, pleep and wellnesscoach.com.